Welcome to Sightline. Our guest this week is Ms. Elaine Conkievich, resident representative at the United Nations Development Program in Mongolia. The United Nations Development Program helps empower lives and build resilient nations. So, Ms. Conkievich, thank you very much for accepting our invitation.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Okay, so and I also like to congratulate you on the 75th anniversary of the establishment of United Nations.
Yes, thank you very much.
Today we're going to discuss such an important topic, which is the socio-economic impact of the COVID-19 in Mongolia, and also the projects and works being conducted by the UNDP. Some people say that Mongolia has been successful in preventing the outbreak in Mongolia, as we have no outbreak in the country. So it's due to the fact that we began taking strict measures, such as halting all international flights and trains and closing down some businesses for several months. But on the other side, our economy, it has been deteriorated. So how would you define the severity of the COVID-19 in Mongolia?
Thank you. Yes, indeed, Mongolia, as you mentioned, took very early on many measures to prevent the outbreak of the COVID-19 virus, and that has been very successful for Mongolia, so that there's no community transmission, and so the health crisis has been averted in that regard. But when we look at the social economic impact through those measures, we actually do see that there's quite significant social economic impact. And we as UNDP already early on this year conducted a rapid integrated assessment of the social economic impact of these measures on vulnerable groups and vulnerable value chains. And what this impact assessment showed is that indeed, as you mentioned, due to the measures, there was a very high impact on a number of vulnerable groups. For example, migrants who've moved to Ulaanbaatar in the last couple of years, herders, people with disabilities, youth, children, and women in particular as well. Because the closing of the schools had quite an impact on children remaining at home that needed, of course, care, needed to switch overnight to an online learning system, which didn't exist. And also the keeping of everyone at home also raised a lot of tensions. And unfortunately, we saw a very high, have seen, and it's still existing, a very high increase in domestic violence against women and children. So the impact, from the measures has been quite substantial. As you mentioned, also economic loss, where the GDP has decreased by nearly 10% in the first half of the year, decreased trade. A very stark hit on the tourism sector, basically being almost closed down in effect, because there's no international tourism right now. So there's been many impacts on the social economic side, and we as UNDP and other UN agencies are working together to try to mitigate this impact, particularly on vulnerable groups, because as we work to support Mongolia in the development, in the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals, you're probably aware that a big focus is on leave no one behind. So our particular focus is to really work with the vulnerable groups, the individuals who are struggling quite a bit now in this difficult time.
So as you mentioned, there have been lots of impacts in the tourism sector, and also in the domestic violence, and also the employment rates, especially the women, because they have to look after their children at home. So
also small and medium enterprises, because many women are employed in small and medium enterprises, and also in the informal sector, where many women are employed working, and that negatively impacts also because they don't have access then to social services, social resources, social protection when you're engaged in the informal sector.
Yes, of course. So can you talk more about the achievements that have been made starting the COVID-19 recovery response?
So one thing in follow-up to the development of the social economic response plan, as part of this, we did the assessment focusing on leave no one behind, which has been shared with the government and is also, I think, very useful for having a better understanding of the situation on the ground, also for targeting of government measures to alleviate the situation that vulnerable groups are faced with. In the context of this social economic response plan, we also help to identify gaps, meaning areas that are not being addressed under the government's measures to alleviate the situation. And so we're currently working with other UN agencies trying to raise resources and attention to these gaps so that they can be more effectively addressed. And this is meant to kind of help to fill the response period, which is now in the next 12 to 18 months, so basically by the end of 2021. Mm-hmm. But beyond that, I think what UNDP is very significantly supporting the government right now, and we're working with the Deputy Prime Minister on this, is to look at the longer term recovery. Mm-hmm. Because on the one hand, you have the response, which is now the kind of urgent need and, you know, in the more short term immediate period. But overall, the damage that's being happening because of these measures is quite significant in the sense that it will take a longer term recovery.
Can you say how longer it will be? Like how longer will we face the impact?
I'm not sure anyone can say how long the impact will be, but clearly it's long term, meaning several years. Mm-hmm. And in our work, we have very much supported and provided input to the development of the 4-year government action plan and the 5-year general guideline of the government of Mongolia, because those are the strategic planning documents of the government. So we're trying to support, you know, the recovery thinking and focus within the government's framework.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so you mentioned about the vulnerable groups. Which group has been like the most vulnerable among those?
Mm-hmm. Definitely women is one of a very affected group, as we talked about a little bit already, because of employment situation, having the double responsibility of the unpaid care work at home, looking after the children, helping with education, the situation around domestic violence that has dramatically risen over the last period. So women across different aspects of society have been affected in many, many ways. Then, of course, children, because we've seen, you know, the switch to the online learning was quite a challenge, and then the schools were closed for half a year, as we know. And also the violence against children, unfortunately, has also been increased, and also with children being left at home, we've also seen the accidents and even accidental deaths, which is very tragic, etc. So children definitely, youth as well, because with the halt in the education and the stopping of the exams and things that would, you know, that the youth could move in their to the university and get a good education and kind of have their path kind of smooth has been disrupted. Mm-hmm. And also there's a very high youth unemployment, as we know, in Mongolia. And so it's been very challenging for youth to get engaged economically and to benefit. And also the herders are a very vulnerable group as well, because the trade of the cashmere, which is one of the very important products and exports and source of income for Mongolia, was more or less halted because of the closure of the borders. And so not having the income that the herders would normally have from cashmere has been having quite a big impact on the livelihoods of herders. But we've been trying to address that specifically by using this as an opportunity to support the herders, the cashmere herders, in adding more value to their cashmere so that they can get a higher price for it on a direct market, for example, with Europe. And we're currently working on launching a sustainable cashmere platform, which is meant to bring together all the actors in Mongolia and abroad even that are working on cashmere production and promotion, to have a kind of common approach to the sustainability of the cashmere and also the traceability of the cashmere. So there's a number of other actors also in Mongolia working on this as well, which have done work for many years. And so we're also trying to bring everyone together to solidify and bring better results for Mongolia going forward.
That's right. So let's talk more about the Mongolia's herders. So as we know that Mongolia's pasture land is said to have been deteriorated.
Yes.
Like it's 70% of it has been deteriorated in some level. And actually, on contrast, Mongolian livestock population has been increasing.
Yes, dramatically.
Yes. About the herders, they have got this risk of losing their animals due to the diseases or due to malnutrition
and
and the heavy weather conditions. So what kind of other projects have you been launching, and also including the cashmere project, in order to sustain the herders' life, especially during this COVID-19 time?
Yes, the land degradation is indeed a very big issue, and this also impacts not only on herders' lives but also on climate change and overall destruction of land and the environment in Mongolia. So this is clearly, as UNDP, very much a focus for us. When we look at the livelihoods of herders, as mentioned, Kashmir is one big part of that, but also the dairy industry is very relevant to the livestock issue. So we have particularly also been focusing on the dairy value chain and trying to support the herders to come up with better and more interesting, attractive dairy products that could also potentially be marketed abroad. And so one of the particular focus that we have is on the development of probiotics, which are substances that come from milk and can be used, I mean, they're used to boost immunity as well. You can have probiotic drinks, you can have the little capsules, things like that. So we're trying to develop different products which will also have added effect, not only for Mongolian population, but abroad, to bring into the market probiotics from Mongolia, because Mongolia has very specific genetic resources as well, which are not found anywhere else in the world. And
so it's our advantage.
Yeah, so it's to your advantage, but we're also trying to have this better regulated through legislation, because otherwise there will be a kind of overuse or misuse of these very valuable genetic resources of Mongolia. So it's very important to have this kind of monitored and done in a good way. So we're also trying to diversify the dairy products to goat, yak, camel milk products and things that are maybe more exotic and interesting to other markets. So trying to work with the herders so they have more valuable products, which hopefully in the longer run could also help them to reduce their herd size, because if they can have a more condensed, more valuable herd products from their herd, then they don't need to have so many animals as well. Yeah, so this is also the thinking behind to work also towards herd reduction. We're also working on other legislative issues, because the pasture land law is a piece of legislation that's been pending for many, many years, and is very important for Mongolia, and we hope the parliament in this session will be able to adopt legislation to regulate the pasture land management and the user fees, because that would be important also for good maintenance of the environment in Mongolia.
Have you started conducting that project since the COVID-19 outbreak started?
Yes,
okay.
yeah. That was a direct response, because we particularly identified the Kashmir value chain and the dairy value chain as those that we felt were vulnerable, but also dairy we selected because it's a value chain where a lot of women are engaged, and we wanted to ensure to have a specific focus for the benefit of women in Mongolia.
So speaking of women and girls, I saw the report by your UNDP website, and it says that the COVID-19 pandemic will push more than 47 million girls and women below the poverty line.
Globally.
Globally, yes. Yeah. You were also mentioning that the situation is also the same in Mongolia. So what projects, namely, have you been conducting in order to help the women and girls in Mongolia?
Yes, we're particularly interested in the economic empowerment of women, primarily because girls should be at school and getting their education. So looking at economic empowerment of women, we're trying to focus on one, as I mentioned briefly before, about getting women out of the informal sector, where they're engaged in the informal sector. Because if they don't have a proper employment with a contract, with social protection, pension, this leads them to economic vulnerability. So that's very much a focus of ours, in order to work with partners, other organizations as well, to bring women into the formal employment sector. We'd also like to provide economic opportunities. So, for example, as I mentioned, the work in the dairy sector was selected in particular, and Kashmir also employs a lot of women as well. So that's our focus, to try through the established economic value chains, as they're called, to also have a focus on women. We also hope to be starting very soon a project on women's participation in decision making. This is a very important initiative, because Mongolia is quite low in that area when we look also at global percentages. In your parliament, there's only 17% of women that are members of parliament, which is below the global average, and also not matching the capacities and competencies of women in Mongolia, who can certainly easily be with parity with men in the parliament, because it would be very important for Mongolia's development to have more women engaged in decision making in the political sector. So we also hope to be actively engaged in that over the next 4 years.
Okay, thank you very much. And now let's talk about the post-pandemic socio-economic future of Mongolia. So what challenges and opportunity do you see in Mongolia?
Well, right now, the situation is closed. I mean, the borders are closed. There's no flights, which, as we mentioned, is impacted on the tourism sector. There is an opportunity. I mean, we need to look forward and try to do some planning for what the future holds and how to move towards that future. And so one of it will also be, considering how Mongolia can open up over the next period to go back to the usual engagement and exchange, one of knowledge, from different exchanges and student exchanges, but also travel to bring back the trade and also the tourism sector. Then certainly on the economic side, as I mentioned, trying to develop more sustainable economic systems. The social protection measures for the population are having an impact. They're helping the vulnerable groups at this difficult time. But overall, there's probably a need for some more review on systemic approach to social protection, maybe possibly more some targeted measures that can help to also more effectively use the public resources, so the state budget, for the recovery period. Because right now, unfortunately, Mongolia is also having a very high debt situation because of the loans that have been taken on and the fiscal measures that have been put in place to alleviate the difficulties. So their bigger, more strategic, let's say, approach to the future is, I think, needed. And we also, as Mongolia, are trying to do also some innovation. We started a kind of systems thinking transformational journey where we're looking at how to improve upon these systems. So what would the post-pandemic Mongolia look like? And in connection with that, we're actually also going to launch very soon a so-called accelerator lab. Yeah, it's something very exciting that UNDP is doing so far in about 60 countries around the world, and we're in the second group now for another 30 countries. And it's basically, we will have some additional people working in our office who will be looking across our work and our portfolios kind of horizontally and integrating into our programs to really look at what we can do better with more innovation and more acceleration to bring better results quicker for Mongolia. And this is an initiative on learning for development. It's the largest kind of network of learning for development structure globally that was initiated by our administrator in New York, Achim Steiner. And we're connected also with some very prominent research universities and others that are also providing input and support to these accelerator labs. So it's a really good opportunity for Mongolia, and we're very excited about it going forward.
Okay, thank you. That's good news. Unfortunately, our time is coming to an end, and my last question would be what advice would you give to the public and also the decision makers to help them find a better approach to pandemic recovery?
Well, I think important for the work with the public and also the decision makers is the dialogue between the public and the decision makers, because the decision makers are obviously making the policies, making the development for the benefit of the Mongolian people. So Mongolia has certain things like public hearings and some different modalities for this, but being a very strong democracy that Mongolia is, it still would be quite good to develop further the dialogue between citizens and the government, so that citizens are more engaged and participating in the decision making and the development of the policies and the needs of the vulnerable groups and how they're experiencing actually the situation around the COVID-19 restriction measures can more adequately be met going forward.
Okay, so thank you very much for accepting our invitation and coming on our show to talk about the socio-economic impact of COVID-19.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
Sightline and MNB World. Our guest was Ms. Elaine Conkievich, resident representative at the United Nations Development Program in Mongolia. We talked about the socio-economic impact of the COVID-19 in Mongolia and the projects and works being conducted by the UNDP for response and recovery. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.